Hey everyone, welcome to another G News update. The mood of the boardroom is obsessing everybody on the right wing of politics this morning in the media. And we saw the finance minister, Nicola Willis, telling a bunch of people in a room that she shared their frustration and that basically they've done everything they can to make things right. This includes, halving or taking away the sick leave for part-time workers, mostly women. And they've also listened and made things a lot less safe in their work environment. So there would be a lot more deaths in the workplace. And these kind of actions, they've really come to the party and they've done this investment boast. The boasting goes on and on about an investment boast, but hardly any people have actually taken it up. Kind of like the business community will just say anything really. And when you actually look at the mood of the boardroom, there's a lot of clapping and patting on the back to Fran O'Sullivan for producing these averaged rankings that disguise the range, their little aggregate results. So there's 150 hand-picked companies that the New Zealand Herald goes out and goes, you're a member of the Atlas Network, you're part of the NZ initiative, would you like to participate? And then they talk to the people at the very, very top who are completely insulated from the cost of living. And they ask them, how's it going? How do you rate these people that you basically don't pay much attention to? I mean, I'd venture that most of us actually know much more about what's going on in Parliament, what the policies actually are, than just these busy CEOs who are busy traveling the world and running backwards and forwards and occasionally reading, the headlines in Stephen Joyce's slanted magazine, I'll call it a newspaper, I suppose. Anyway, those people in their opinions, they're the ones that we all focus upon. We don't really hear from the workers of this country, which basically make up the vast majority. We don't get a voice. So we focus on this mood of the boardroom. But the mood of the boardroom is basically like a bunch of cranky toddlers who are throwing the rattle right now because they haven't got what they wanted. And this is a bit familiar. Remember during COVID, how the same lot got very upset that some kind of disease that affected other people was getting in the way of their travel plans, and they like to travel, especially to Europe, and to escape winter around about now. So while it rains on everybody else, these people are used to complete freedom, and they're running the big companies and they're getting paid the big bucks. And we're talking millions of bucks. These are the people that are well and truly comfortable and sorted. So what's their opinion about how things are going? Well, the opinion was that Nicola Willis lost a lot of credibility for talking out of turn about the price of butter, because the price of butter doesn't affect any of the people in the boardroom. What affects them is the idea that Nicola Willis didn't know that this was about global commodity prices, and of course Fonterra will take a little cut, but the idea that we would intervene in the domestic market to help with the bottom feeders, that was just disgraceful thinking, how dare we? I mean, this is set internationally, so we don't help people. So some of the commentary was all about how Nicola Willis had lost credibility by going out there and saying, well, I'm going to do something about the price of butter, when, it really doesn't affect the people at the top and the mood of the boardroom. So they weren't too impressed with that. And one of them even went as far as to say, well, look, if you're not careful, you're going to get this loopy-loony Labour Green TPM government, and that will care about the vast majority of people and actually invest in this place. And we don't want that. That would be like suicide. And I think everybody, who was well and truly sorted and very, very selfish agreed. I mean, these were the hand-picked people that Fran O'Sullivan had gone out and selected and, asked the same old questions. They got together, basically talked the same talk, had the herd mentality, and all agreed with each other on things and then pretended they were all bloody experts. But in actual fact, the truth of the matter is, I mean, they were all just basically herd mentality people. The one comment that I thought was reasonably interesting was that Nicola Willis had shown absolutely zero thought leadership. And what excites us is when somebody comes along with something that seems absolutely true and obvious, but no one said it before. So this is the kind of thing that I think does get people excited. And when somebody like Jacinda Ardern says something like, power, it's actually responsibility. Just a simple concept like power is responsibility does make us all think. And it's kind of like, well, that's posing something rather profound and interesting. So we get quite interested in a person that can come and introduce that kind of thinking to our daily thoughts. And I think that's why a lot of people miss Jacinda, because you don't get that from the current leadership. You don't certainly get it from Christopher Luxon. As you know, and everybody else knows in this country by now, Luxon came in at 15th on a pretty low score, which compared to last year was like, a long way down. So Luxon was outside the top 10 in his own cabinet. He wasn't rated. There's a whole lot of conversation about getting rid of him, but how do you get rid of him and who would replace him? And Nicola Willis is constantly asked, would you step up and be the Prime Minister? And she says, oh, I'm not interested. Pretty much like everybody who's planning a coup says before the coup. But the New Zealand media is really so skint and, not doesn't have anybody left after all the cuts and everything, that it made a massive boo-boo because it can't afford to actually, proofread anything that it publishes. It just rushes out the first draft. And they said that Willis had remarked on how nobody sees how Christopher Luxon is going around about behind the scenes and deftly, without a T, kind of maximizing the suability or the ability for the government to be sued in the way that he's managing these coalition partners of his, like Davy Boy and Winston. So that was a massive clanger, and at the same breath, she's trying to tell us that she's not interested in the job. So we all had a good laugh at this mood of the boardroom this morning, which comes out. It's pretty tiresome. It's meaningless, averaged aggregate numbers from about 150 people who don't feel the effects of the cost of living crisis at all and are totally immune to being in touch or being empathetic because they don't really experience any kind of constraint or limitation at the moment, like you or I do, for example. So they don't represent us. So that's all a big waste of time. The other thing that I think is really interesting is that there's been a pretty light coverage, I think, in New Zealand about Trump. If you look at the Herald now and the panels, they're having problems with their microphones, and you've got people like Tim Wilson and they're banging his hands together next to the microphone until Michael Moore actually has to say, stop, we've got a problem with the microphone, but we actually have a problem with a guest that isn't media trained and is banging his hands next to things. But the reality is they don't have anything really that amazing to say. And, they're still talking about Charlie Kirk and how, he tried to disagree respectfully and all this kind of stuff. That carries on in right-wing media. But I think really, the truth of the matter is that Trump actually did give a big speech at the United Nations that I've watched the entire 57 minutes and 30 seconds odd of. And so I can report to you now in this update, what he actually said in summary that may not have been really reported in New Zealand. Because right now at the Herald now, Michael Moore is still talking about paracetamol in yesterday's news. So the Herald here in New Zealand takes about 24 hours to catch up before it starts to talk about things. And they present old news as their news. So I will say, though, that it was interesting that Michael Moore did bring on a very astute medical person this morning who said he did get angry at Trump doing this because it does really cause harm to people if they don't go on paracetamol when they're pregnant. And this whole thing about autism is just a load of bollocks. So anyway, it's quite good to repeat, sound messages and to promote science in a world where science is being attacked by lunatic right-wing fringe knuckle brains, basically, people who are gullible and listen to Mr. Kennedy and Mr. Trump and just don't know anything. So they just follow these people because they seem to be right or they seem to be true. And there's this kind of positivity that's attracted to someone that's very confident and kind of going up against the system. So Trump's stick is always about how he's rallying against these woke people that care or that are too green or, believe in science. So these anti-science kind of messages are pretty common and people are clinging to that on the right and denying science in some sort of bewildered herd, that thinks that Trump is there to save them. So what did Trump say at the United Nations? Let's get on with that. Well, basically, he got up there and he started talking about how the teleprompter wasn't working. And then later on in his speech, he had a go at the UN saying, look, you couldn't even get your escalator working. And my wife, nearly had a problem on the escalator. The teleprompter's not working. So I'll just do this without notes because I'm the greatest. He talked then about how he had personally stopped 7 wars in his time in office, and it would have been 8, but Putin made this difficult, and you can't always get what you want, sort of like a rolling stone. And he basically carried on praising himself for what he personally thinks he heroically did all alone. And he had a crack at Europe and said that Europe were still buying Putin's oil and gas, and as long as they're going to continue to do that, the Americans himself are prepared to tariff the crap out of Russia, but Europe need to step up and stop using oil and gas. So he just sort of said this, and the camera panned round to everyone from, Germany and different countries. The European leaders there were kind of like just sitting there taking it. As he said, your countries are going to hell in a handbasket because of immigration. He said that immigration was the world's greatest problem and biggest problem right now, and that all of these countries had kind of attacked the United States by letting all of these immigrants come into his country, and now they're not. Now they've been stopped, and so he solved all of that. And there was human trafficking, children going missing, 300,000 children, and they've so far saved 30,000 of them. So he was going on about all these topics, and when it came to the whole topic of what to do about Gaza, basically Trump only had 1 or 2 sentences to say in the whole 57 minutes. He dwelt on it for about, I'd say, less than 30 seconds. And all he basically said was that, you countries that have actually gone out there and done something now about a two-state solution right now, you are rewarding terrorism. You are giving Hamas a big fat reward. And what we need to do is just send one signal, and that is hand over the hostages. And he talked about there being 20 still remaining, and he wanted the bodies back of the dead. And basically, that was about all he actually said about the entire topic. So, I mean, Winston Peters didn't need to go there to establish any facts. There wasn't any more information. He could have put both feet into the water months ago. This wasn't very illuminating. Trump carried on then and talked about a whole bunch of other things like beautiful, clean, beautiful coal, and how he doesn't allow people to say the word coal in the White House. You have to say beautiful, clean coal. It's because it's beautiful, and how the United States has more of its own energy security and own resources than any other country, and it's even got more coal if it needs it. So clean, beautiful coal. And Dig Baby Dig came up, and we could sort of see where Shane Jones and Winston Peters were actually taking notes and rehearsing and scripting and repeating these kind of Trumpian rhetorics back in New Zealand to try and encourage us all to go back to the world of fossil fuels, to transfer back away from renewables, which Trump actually said was all a hoax. All this climate science was a hoax. He went on about how carbon footprints were a hoax, and he said Obama got onto a big old plane that emitted a lot of emissions, flew to Hawaii, and played a round of golf before getting back into that big old plane, not a new plane, but an old plane, and flew all the way back again, emitting more emissions. He also had a crack at the UN, saying the UN were pretty hopeless, and that the building that they were in, he used to have a deal there that he could have put in beautiful marble, I could have put in beautiful fittings here, but they went a different way, and now they've got this rubbish building. So that the speech was sort of a rambling, broad-ranging rant, really. He had a crack at Brazil. He said that the Brazilians had been attacking the United States, and he'd bumped into their leader, and he was a nice man, and he liked the man. He talked for 39 seconds with them. But, that's kind of example. But, now Brazil's going to be punished with tariffs, and tariffs are defending American sovereignty. So those were kind of the key messages. One of the other things from that speech that I thought was pretty interesting was about 10% of the room clapped for Trump at the end. The majority of people didn't clap at all. So he'd come there to kind of like put out his version of reality. He'd spoken, about things that were very wide ranging. Only 30 seconds on Gaza, and basically it was the kind of thing we're becoming used to, this sort of fairly crazy man that's got the following of all these fairly uneducated, boneheaded people that are attracted to the strongman image that's making a difference and rescuing American sovereignty while the rest of the world goes down the tubes and tariffs are really working for Americans. When we all know that he's just making it more expensive for his own people and disrupting world trade, and the whole world order we'd been used to is now scrambling and having to reorganize itself. So in that context, I don't think Winston learnt much about Gaza, and we're still sitting back home here waiting on the government that's not very transparent and open with us to kind of dawdle around and wait and do something that's really risk averse and try and kind of get some more votes for Winston. When it came to that whole area, there have been more and more speeches from different world leaders about Gaza and the shocking situation we've got where people who live in Palestine do not actually get to live a normal life, and they don't have the safety and security, and they're enduring an unfolding genocide. So the people that actually aren't like Trump followers, who don't have any care or empathy for this, who don't have feelings, who are basically quite psychopathic about killing. They didn't care about the 61 Palestinians overnight who were killed by the Israelis. They were just sort of a theoretical number that they thought no more about for the rest of the day in New Zealand. But some of them had seen an article that the New Zealand Herald, chaired by Stephen Joyce, had made sure was published today, and that was that Hamas had actually executed 3 Palestinians for basically betraying Hamas and to the Israelis, and basically this was their law, I suppose, their revolutionary law that the penalty is death. So we got to see the visceral framing of this, but we do not see anything much more death, much more disproportionate death and killing and murdering in the West media. We just don't. It's not highlighted to us what the names of the victims are. The 61 people that were alive last week that are now dead, or the 100 before that. And while these hundreds of people are being killed on a daily basis, Christopher Luxon is saying, "What's the race? There's no race here. Let's take another day or two. Let's just get around to this. It's very complicated and very complex." So I think it's very dissatisfactory, and I think the vast majority of New Zealanders, according to Reid Research, want us to do more about Palestine, to sanction Palestine more. We've seen Christopher Luxon try to avoid doing anything about trade. The exports from Israel total over $200 million, and he doesn't want to touch it. So the best way to deceive New Zealanders and to avoid touching trade with Israel, which would possibly cause a problem, is to actually just say it's too small to touch. $200 million, it would be quite significant. And it's not talked about by Michael Mora. It's not talked about by the team at Newstalk ZB. They don't talk about this 200 million. Nobody comes out with the numbers. And I think that's the case on a lot of topics, really. You don't see the detailed facts behind things. So, yeah, I think that's the case when it came to those sectors as well. When we have conversations about our economy, we're not getting a very good level of analysis. And I think Gary Stevenson talks about this in the UK as being a problem, that the public is served up by a media that delivers crap analysis. So you're getting crap analysis from the media. It basically doesn't actually understand the system itself, so it can't really comment on it very well. And it's relying on information that's very limited from the Department of Statistics, who have also been scaling back their resources. So one of the problems with scaling back public services and the way that we measure things and continually ducking and diving and changing this is that it's designed so that the public never gets a clear picture of trends and data and doesn't understand deeply the truth of the matter. Instead, you're going to get Fran O'Sullivan's mood of the boardroom, and this is going to reflect some kind of leadership position, The elite and the sorted and the wealthy have spoken because 150 of them have said this, and then Franz punched the numbers down, aggregated them, hid the detail from us, and produced this, magazine that has all their commentaries in it. Bernard Hickey passed a comment this morning that you'll find that the New Zealand Herald polishes this up and hypes it and makes it more positive than the actual commentary from the 150 people who were quite scathing. The idea that Erica is number one in the rankings at the moment probably relates to just the fact that with a 3 week long memory or so that most people have, they can vaguely remember that NCEA was changed. So something tangible was delivered by Erica. But what they're probably not seeing is the 6 words in Te Reo that were taken out of on the Marae, the book. They probably don't care too much about those kind of issues because I'd wager that the vast majority of the 150 of them probably are not tangata whenua, right? So there's cultural bias involved in these kind of assessments of Erica's performance. The other thing about Erica, I think, is that she'd been in the news over the last few weeks, making some punchy kind of announcements. So the recent perceptions in the last couple of weeks of performance and deliverability, and the fact that she hasn't been too punished by anybody in the media, probably put her at the top of the class. Second, you had Winston coming in at second, and this is also about perception management, that Winston had sort of got some kind of control over the government at the moment, and was overseas fighting the good fight and sounding as if he was being reasonable and considered, when in actual fact, these people have just kind of signed up to a foreign buyer's sellout, really, from an NZ First point of view. And they've also agreed to disagree on the pathways to residency, visas, and sort of said that basically New Zealand is a training ground, a stepping stone to Australia. And you had Erica coming back and saying last night, clapping back, that it was more the other way round, that Australia was more a stepping stone to New Zealand, because people like to come here and work for much lower wages. But nobody questioned that, of course. So yeah, those are kind of like the sort of big stories this morning, I think. What else has been happening? Well, there was just a tidbit of information. Yesterday when France's President Macron actually gave that really inspiring speech about how we could actually go about having a two-state solution. As long as the world got on board and did something now, we could actually, go into Gaza with a force. We could rebuild the city. We could bring in the aid. We could actually do something as a world, take action, and recognize this state now, give them all the rights so that this can all happen. But, this all sounded really good, but then I saw some footage of Macron trying to make his way across the city in New York and being stopped and prevented from going down a road to the building where these speeches were happening by the police in New York. And this is because a cavalcade was passing by, and I think it could have been the Trump cavalcade. Anyway, Macron got on the phone and rang his good mate Trump, but to no avail. He still couldn't be driven down the road and make it to the building, no matter, even if he was the president of France. So, he had to walk. So he ended up walking, down the road to get there. And this is America for you, man. Okay, so America's a crazy place, yeah? All that news recently that came out in America, I'll just quickly summarize it for those that haven't heard it before. There's this comedian guy, Jimmy Kimmel, and he had actually been taken off air because this guy called Bernard Carr, who runs the FCC, had threatened to take away the licenses for ABC, who are the media company that runs Jimmy Kimmel's show. And he'd said, like, we can do it the easy way or the hard way, and basically was looking to, take away the licenses unless the right-wing government, the Trump administration, was able to censor what was being said on these comedy shows, or any show for that matter. And so this was very dangerous stuff. And Kimmel was suspended temporarily. But then there was a great big boycott by about 400 celebrities in Hollywood, and they all came out, including Jennifer Aniston and a few others. And basically, there was $4 billion worth of boycotting happening at Disney because Disney is the parent company of ABC, and Disney were getting hurt in the pocket. And, nothing talks louder than money going out the door. So Disney went, shit, we're losing money. We better actually do the right thing because money talks. So they said, hey, Jimmy, how about coming back on air? And so because of the efforts of the public to boycott Disney, we got Jimmy Kimmel back on air, and he's no longer suspended. In the meantime, Ted Cruz and I think actually Rand Paul, both Republicans, spoke out about how this is really dangerous stuff we're seeing from the FCC, from the Trump administration, running around trying to suppress the political opponents or anybody in the press or the media now from speaking out, and they will get their licenses revoked. So that's one piece of news. We saw the same kind of thing happening in different areas. One of the other areas is Trump had said, look, if you don't actually seek permission as a media from the Pentagon about your stories and your information, then you could have your credentials removed. So there's a whole debate about whether a reporter can really report if they're actually having to say to the Pentagon, is this correct and is this right? And the Pentagon just correcting them and saying, don't say anything bad about us, we're perfect. So that's not really reporting, is it? So there are these big threats at the moment like this going on, which are very deeply concerning for a lot of people who've basically been asleep, and they're starting to see what this authoritarian kind of flavor of government they've got with Trump, and you're seeing all of those abductions of people who are being bundled up and hooded and taken off to camps because they're suspected of being illegal aliens when many of them aren't. So this kind of behavior is really, really frightening for people to see. Another story that you may or may not know is that China has agreed that it's going to sell off the algorithms for TikTok to Oracle and a consortium of other private investors, which include the Murdochs. And so I mentioned that this morning. And yeah, this is really about the fact that the Americans had kind of outlawed TikTok. They didn't trust it, thought it was a security risk. And because it's so popular, there was a big deal there. So Oracle, they kind of own all the data anyway over there. So China's basically working with the Trump administration to do a deal, and that's probably going to happen sometime in the next month or two, or maybe a few weeks. So those kind of stories are shaping up over there. But, the main thing that we've been hearing about is this Kirk assassination and the way in which Trump went along to that funeral and then kind of politicized the whole thing and turned it into an attack on his political opponents. So this is what you're sort of really seeing here is the politicization of fairly tragic events. You're seeing these very wrongful political assassinations happening in America. And we're all just sitting here hoping like crap that we don't go down that path, that we don't go down the eight-party path of, legalizing semi-automatic weapons again, bringing on an American situation here where people get shot and killed. And ultimately, the sort of safety of our MPs are important to us. We don't want that kind of thing happening to people that speak out, for example. So that's just a bit of a summary of some of the things in the American news space at the moment. Anyway, back home, we're going to also hear about the new governor of the Reserve Bank. I think this is basically weirdly timed, and it's coming early because the government is actually panicking at the moment over those GDP results because they know that there was a massive wound. They didn't see that coming, that big result. No, neither did any of the retail banks that do the forecasting, neither did the Reserve Bank. And so Christian Hawkesby, who's probably done a pretty good job and has actually in the past defended the maintenance of the capital limits for banks, to have to reach, and in the event of a 200-year shock, to protect us all from massive losses. He'd been under attack from the NZ Initiative, well, not him personally, Adrian Orr, but that whole capital limit thing had been a war that had been fought in our media, and the same people were out there now. Today, I heard this morning, one of the top guys at the NZ Initiative was saying it's really important that the Reserve Bank remains independent. But ask yourself, have you heard how this appointment was made, who made it, or any of the details about the criteria and what makes some candidates more favourable than others when it comes to who's going to become the new governor? Well, I could sort of see that this Christian Hawkesby basically had almost been ruled out because he'd shown in the past that he cared about people and he cared about, the event of a big, 200-year financial shock and those bank capital limits. So the way I'm reading it is that Willis and Co. want these people out, that they've been behind this provocation and aggressive interference with the Reserve Bank all along. And basically it's been hidden and manufactured and kind of massaged along the way. We've demonized the Reserve Bank for doing its job through COVID. It did pretty well. It kept us all in our jobs. The side effect of a mediocre level of international inflation here, much lower than the United Kingdom, by the way, if we are getting one of their people here from the Bank of England. They had higher inflation than New Zealand did. We're seeing a mediocre level of inflation being catastrophized. We're seeing the context removed by Christopher Luxon. We're seeing him taking credit for bringing declining inflation that he inherited down when it's nothing to do with him. We're seeing them not able to quantify anything. It's all very vague, but it's a cool story, bro. We're seeing the mood of the boardroom kind of being a bunch of sort of amorphous, aggregated averages, that Fran O'Sullivan presents out of 5, and it's supposed to mean something. But, all it means is that the government's out of favor while the business community are experiencing pain. So as soon as they actually start making money again, whether it's bad or good for the country, they don't give a shit. It's not about the people. It's about their own pockets, right? So that'll all go back up again. If a Labour government gets into power and it starts doing things like making a much fairer tax system, then the business confidence and the mood of the boardroom will fall through the floor down to like 1 out of 5 because it's very, very selfish. So it's not about what's good for New Zealand necessarily. So that's about all I have to say. It's a bit of a rant, but here we are again in the middle of the week, and I just thought you might find some of this information fresh and new and stuff that you didn't really think about before. And if so, that's my job done. I'll talk to you all again soon. Bye now.
Welcome to G News, the good news.